Well, with their thoughts on what we're hearing from Doug Ford, we're now joined by our political panel. Susan Smith, a former Liberal strategist, now principal and co-founder of Blue Sky Strategy Group. Cole Hogan, a conservative digital strategist and principal at GT. And George Soule, a former NDP Director of Communications, now principal at Syntax Strategic. Hello to the three of you.
Hello.
Hello. Hello. So listen, let's begin with Doug Ford, because, you know, Donald Trump essentially said the Ontario Premier can say what he wants to say, but is it a positive or a negative thing for Canadian officials, Premier, Prime Minister, otherwise, to remind American politicians that if you slap tariffs, there will be retaliation?
I think it's great from a Ford perspective, because there is a distinction between the Prime Minister doing something at this stage of the game and the Premier's flexing a little bit. Danielle Smith's got her, I'm going to take the diplomatic approach, which is a little ironic for Danielle Smith, and Ford's flexing, which is what he usually does. But I think it's a really good reminder to Americans, with whom Premier Ford and Ontario has an excellent relationship, that we do more than ship goods. There is also critical things like electricity. So I think it's a good flex, and it allows the Prime Minister to come in diplomatically behind and our trade negotiators to come in diplomatically behind. So go, Doug Ford, have at it.
Yeah, and a reminder that for the United States, Canada is their #1 source of oil, #1 source for electricity. Cole, what do you say to being this, I guess, forthright at this moment in time?
I think it's a good thing. Doug Ford's U.S. media tour and ad blitz, I think, has been what the country's needed and shows some leadership in this regard that's helpful for the country at large. I think, you know, over time we'll see Doug Ford continue to take this tack with Donald Trump, and I think it's a good thing for him to establish firm lines and say, look, we don't want to cut off energy to the United States, but we will if we have to. And I think that's what the people of Ontario and Canada expect from Doug Ford as he's delivered to them. And I think that, too, is the difference you've seen between Doug Ford and dealing with Donald Trump and how Justin Trudeau is dealing with Donald Trump.
Okay, I'll pick up on that in a moment. But George, what do you say about being so forceful at this point of negotiations and talk?
Well, I think getting some facts out there is important. I mean, I think we've talked before about how there's not really a Canadian and American auto industry, for instance. That's one of the things that Doug Ford talked about. You know, I used to work for the steel workers, and we would say we actually touch a car more than the auto workers do, because parts go back and forth across the border so many times in that process. And reminding Trump that that's the case, you know, and he probably listens to people on Fox News more than he even listens to someone around his dinner table. So getting those facts out is probably a good thing. I mean, my hope is that would happen in a coordinated fashion, though, right? I mean, like, one of the facts that we really need to get through is Ford keeps saying that we owe them $100 billion or $100 trillion, or pick a number that he wants to throw out there.
Trump saying that.
Sorry, Trump saying that. Yeah. Trump says that. But the fact is that's because of the oil. It's not actually the deficit. A trade deficit doesn't mean they're subsidizing us. It means that we are giving them more things than they're giving us. Trading, selling. Mm-hmm. And so him understanding that process better is going to be important when these negotiations happen. And that's one of the biggest things that's missing here, is a clear Canada-wide explanation of what this process looks like for our two countries. And so starting that, I think, is positive. I just hope that it's part of a bigger plan.
Okay, listen, I'm going to pick up with you, Cole, now, because you mentioned what the Prime Minister is doing. And yes, the comments that Doug Ford has made is getting attention south of the border, but so too is the commentary we heard from the Prime Minister 2 nights ago at that fundraising dinner here in Ottawa, in which he equated Kamala Harris's defeat at the polls with sexism winning again and Americans not voting for a woman. That has received some criticism. Elon Musk calling the Prime Minister a tool. Premier Ford saying that it was not helpful. Cole, what do you say about the Prime Minister's efforts, given that he's trying to create this Team Canada approach and this charm offensive in the U.S.?
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the Team Canada approach, does it? I don't think when we see the Prime Minister getting up here, what exactly does it mean when there is the threat of 25% tariffs that the Prime Minister gets up at a private gala and says the democratic election of President-elect Trump is a threat to women's rights? I don't think that's a strong opening negotiating tactic. And what's more, all throughout 2024, we've seen the Liberal Party, its MPs, its ministers, the Prime Minister himself, draw the false comparison between Donald Trump and Pierre Poilievre. Trump's team saw those attacks, and I don't think the Liberal Party gave much consideration to the fact that they have to work with this guy again. So no wonder the relationship is off to a rough start once again.
Okay, you're giving a bit of a response with your head.
Methinks they doth protest too much. I think Trudeau's position on this has been clear. He didn't call into question the democratic election. He said the Americans didn't elect a woman for the second time. I think Trudeau's damned if he does and damned if he doesn't, right? There's one side that says, you know, he got called governor. Why is he getting pushed around by Trump? And then he stands up and he makes a comment that's actually a statement of fact in the U.S., and people are attacking him for that. I think he might have gotten out of bed on the wrong side. That day he was testy. I was at that dinner. His tone was a little bit interesting. But in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it matters. And I do think Canada will have a coordinated approach, and it may be with premiers like Ford punching in certain places, and then the Prime Minister and his team and everybody that they're activating doing things behind the scenes.
Okay. George, what do you say?
I mean, I don't know. It's another example, I think, of Justin Trudeau kind of virtue signaling. Like the dinner, I have a lot of respect for Equal Voice and the work that they do and talking about that. I mean,
that was the dinner that
that's
was
the dinner
happening
that
in
was
Ottawa.
happening at, yeah. And so obviously you're going to try to talk about feminism, and especially in politics. I mean, Justin Trudeau's the leader of a party that's never been led by women. He didn't make a comment about that. And I think, you know, is Donald Trump a threat to women's rights across North America? For sure. No doubt about it. But is the reason he got elected because of sexism, or exclusively because of sexism? Probably not. It certainly played a role. It always does. I've had the pleasure of working with Rachel Notley, Carla Beck, Nicole Trammell, a lot of great leaders in our party, provincial and federal, and I think that's always a challenge for sure. But I think trying to simplify it and try to get an applause line in at a dinner like that on an issue like this, I think was just a misplay. Okay.
Listen, before we're done, I also want to get some commentary because, as you know, there have been news reports about this rift between the Prime Minister and the Finance Minister. Also, a news report that the Prime Minister has tried to reach out once again to Mark Carney to try to get him into cabinet. What does this say to you, Susan, about the unity or the lack of unity right now within the Trudeau cabinet and what is actually happening in Executive Council?
Well, we're at the stage where everybody expects a cabinet shuffle. We know that there are some ministers who aren't running again, and the Prime Minister has to shuffle his cabinet. We know there are two ministers who have multiple portfolios. The Prime Minister has to shuffle his cabinet. I've said on this program before, I compare it to line matching and with the election of Trump. It's like in hockey, when you're the home team, you see who the away team's got in the ice, then you put your players and you line up against that. That's why this shuffle has taken so long to happen. They want to see who's going to be where in the Trump administration. I think it's every Prime Minister's job to bring the best people they can to the table, elected or unelected at the time. They can run after. We have the precedent with Pettigrew and Dion after the Quebec referendum in '95. If Mr. Carney comes to the table, that's good for Canada. Ms. Freeland led our trade negotiations with the U.S. last time around. She's got a massive Rolodex. If the Prime Minister puts her somewhere else, that's an interesting conversation. I think you have to put the best people in the best chairs at the time and deal with the issues of the day. And the most pressing issue of the day for Canada is how we're going to deal with Donald Trump.
Nicole, what do you say about the divisions now being reported on?
Well, this is the same thing that happened to Bill Morneau, isn't it? Bill Morneau advised some form of fiscal caution. The PMO said to hell with it, and then he's out the door. So I wonder who the PMO prefers here in terms of their finance guru. I know there's been reports of the PMO being displeased with Freeland's communication skills, again, pinning it all on a communications issue, which I don't think is the problem here. So I wonder if Carney's going to have any further success, because I think what the PMO is aiming for is they want what they perceive to be Carney's perceived credibility on these issues. But I think if he goes in there, they're not going to listen to him, and I think that might be the reason for some of the hesitance on going into government.
Okay. George?
Well, I actually agree completely with what both my colleagues just said.
He gets to stay, right?
We like you.
And I think Justin Trudeau's desperate right now. I think it's just a fact, right? Like when he came in to become leader, he saved the Liberal Party from almost certain destruction, and brought them all the way to government. And so and then he made the Liberal Party of Canada largely the party of Justin Trudeau. And now their numbers are in the low 20s, and if they dip into the teens, that's unprecedented for this party. And so he's trying everything he possibly can to prove that he should still be the leader, because who else is going to lead the Justin Trudeau party other than Justin Trudeau? and how we can make friends and somehow breathe life into a party that just keeps sliding downhill. And I think that's what this move is mostly about.
Yeah, okay. Well, we are still waiting for a cabinet shuffle, so we'll see what happens when that takes place. But before we're done, I want to give you a quick 30 seconds here, George, because as you said, you work for Rachel Notley. Rachel Notley announcing today that she will be leaving politics at the end of the year. Do you have anything to reflect on that?
Well, look, when she won in 2015, it was a surprise to many, I mean, including within the NDP, there's no doubt about it, I think, as much to her as anything else. But it's also because of the work that she had done and the pedigree and the length of time that she'd been around that province. She grew up in the north and rural part of the province. Her father, obviously, Grant Notley broke through as well. I mean, never actually made that, obviously, to become premier, but was a huge political leader in Alberta. And Rachel picked up that mantle and took it further than anyone ever could, and then became premier and went through a whole lot of tough things in the first couple of years of her time, obviously, with growing pains of a new government, but still managed to go through some serious problems within the oil sector, and got a pipeline built to Tidewater for the first time in a generation, and so did a lot of great things. And then even after that, even the subsequent elections, held on to official opposition twice. So in addition to becoming government, it wasn't just a flash in the pan. It is now, and probably will be for quite a while, a two-party system in Alberta, with the NDP always being a threat for government. And I think that's going to be her legacy for the rest of her life. And I wish her well. I mean, there's lots of things for her to do in the future. I'll take all the money in my pockets against all the money in anyone else's pockets. For people who think she's going to end up in cabinet for Justin Trudeau, I'll take that bet every day. But lots to see, and I'm looking forward to see what she does next.
Okay. Well, George, thank you for that. Thank you for being here today. And Susan, as always, Cole as well. Thank you very much.
Thanks.